So we've been talking about a lot of things that come up in a human life. And there is, of course, an underlying theme. And it's how do we turn towards the experience we're having with a kind of acceptance, whether it's an illness, maybe an illness that we know we're not going to recover from, or someone close to us in that situation, or whether it's a kind of deterioration of the mental faculties, or other aspects of aging, or whether it's loss. I remember when I was training in ministry school, one of the things that we learned was that whenever a group of people gets together, there's going to be some members in that gathering that are in grief. It's just always the case. And then, of course, we have these social and political situations and experiences that are now becoming more and more serious and concerning and dangerous for many people. So the question is, how do we turn towards it, and how do we process the dukkha, the suffering, the pain, the unsatisfactory nature of it, in a way that we can bring the reality of Dhamma, the reality of the way things are, into sharp focus. It's more than giving us hope or relief from the intensity of the feeling. It's about seeing through it and learning that we have to do that part first. That if we really turn towards it and open to it, it can be very painful sometimes, because we may have to set aside our long held dream of this world being something we can succeed in. That's the picture we're given. If you do the right things, if you are good in school, or you get a good job, or you find the right partner, or there are all these things that we're supposed to do that are supposed to lead to long-term happiness. And it is true that many of the things that choices we make do make our life easier or harder in some ways. But then the reality of the nature of samsara eventually shows itself, and there are these challenges for us to face. And then to really have that ability, or that willingness to face what's happening. And that's internal and it's external. It's like facing the conditions that are around us and what's happening with the people around us. And it's also facing what's arising inside of us and beginning to question or investigate the patterns that we've developed, the stories that we've bought into, the beliefs that we've been told we should hold, but that we really can't verify through our experience. For example, when I was growing up in the fundamentalist Christian environment, there were some very mixed messages around the commandment of not killing. And there were all these, you're not supposed to kill, but then there are these supposedly these justifications for killing. And I was so grateful to have access to the Buddha's teachings where he's so clear. Not that it's somehow killing condemns you to hell, although there's that kind of language in the suttas too, but it's around cause and effect. Like what happens to us, what happens in the heart if we deliberately take the life of another human being in particular. And then to appreciate all the different kinds of circumstances people find themselves in. And what are the circumstances that are occurring? And what is the conditioning, the belief system when someone willfully chooses to kill another person? And what is the result of that? And how that result is tempered by various things. Like if there's joy in that action, then it makes the result more painful. If there's a wish to not do it, and there are many other actions of kindness and compassion, it makes the result much less painful. But the Buddha didn't say, don't kill other human beings because of some decree from on high or some moralistic idea, but he said, I know what happens when people kill. I know the result. And that's why I'm warning you. Don't do that. Avoid that. Make that a firm intention in your life to preserve life, to not kill, and to encourage others to not kill. Okay. And this is how he talked about all of the, we could call them precepts, or just those 10 wholesome things that he puts in that list. And he's talking about it from the perspective of outcome. Where does this lead us? Does it lead us further into the darkness, or does it lead us to the light? And so when there are all these different circumstances, and we have these, we grow up, or we are conditioned by these belief that in that case, there are some times when it's noble to kill. But can we prove it? Does that bear out in experience? And then we have these beliefs that we should feel guilty, or we should feel really bad about things. I was just sharing with Ayya Chitananda the other day that I remember being in a little church in South Holland, Illinois, where the minister from the Netherlands Reformed Church, I think in maybe Holland, Michigan, would come down to give a sermon, once a month or something, and my family would travel an hour to go to this little church to hear it. And it was so dark. He said that if you want to be right with God, you have to be at the bottom of the mountain, groveling, basically, feeling terrible about yourself, feeling miserable about yourself. Well, I took that on as a child. I wondered, will I go to heaven or will I go to hell? Because those were the two options. But all of this, when you start to really dig into the direct experience of reality, these are just ideas. These are just fabrications of the mind that then have such a huge impact on the heart and on our choices. So what the Buddha was trying to encourage was really ask yourself, is this true? This thing that I believe, is this true? And how can I, like I said, we turn towards our experience. We know how it feels. Like right now, what does it feel like to hear what I'm saying? Some people will have, one kind of reaction, and someone else a different kind based on our own conditioning. And, if we can turn towards that experience, how it feels in this moment, particularly if we can go beyond the labels and beyond the words and just really be present with that experience in ourselves. And that's the example I was just giving you is a really dark example. But what about other things? There are other beliefs that we have that might feel more easy to digest. And yet, we really want still to be able to turn towards the felt sense of it and to really be present with it. And then what? Asking, is it really true that I originally was born bad? That there's a kind of original sin idea. And then as we develop in our practice, we can look at that and we can understand that this too is just an idea. Did those people who told me that actually know? Did their teachers know? The Buddha goes through this kind of sequence with some people who come to talk to him. Do you know directly? Do you know the truth of this? So when I shifted away from Christianity and I started attending this place called the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, the fundamental principle they looked to was we're originally naturally good. Okay, that was helpful. That was more uplifting and easier uh, to use as a principle. But do they know? Okay, the Buddha didn't say whether we're originally good or originally bad. It kind of, there is that one part where he talks about the mind being luminous and the defilements adventitious. So there's kind of that idea that the mind is pure, is good, and these defilements come through and kind of cloud things and mess things up. But if we can see through that, then what we know is that goodness. And then, our role, our position as practitioners is to investigate that. And what do we see when we really, take that into meditation? And there are, I'm not going to kind of try to describe like a sequence of how we come to an understanding of the nature of reality, because it's going to be different for each one of us. Based on our conditioning, different elements show up. But places that are important to put our attention are those kinds of ideas that bring us this pain, the suffering, the dukkha. And when we turn towards that dukkha, that suffering, whether it's something around guilt or whether it's something around, fear, or whether it's something around a feeling of loss, or whatever it is, and to first and foremost allow ourselves to really feel it and not feel bad about feeling it. That it's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to have whatever this experience is in this present moment. Open up to it. Be willing to listen to our own mind, to be able to listen and accept that this is how it feels right now. And then investigate. What is at the bottom of this, at the root of this suffering? Some idea that I'm fundamentally bad? Is that true? Some idea that I'm fundamentally good? Is that true? Does it matter? And it's not about coming to some intellectual conclusion or some coming up with some philosophy, or I'm going to decide to believe in this, because anything we decide to believe in still leaves questions, still leaves some doubt underneath, because if we don't see it directly for ourselves, there's going to be doubt. And there's nothing wrong with doubt being present. Then we're present with the doubt. It's okay. So how does one come, though, even if we don't try to put steps in place? Although the Buddha, like all of the things the Buddha said about the Noble Eightfold Path, he's like, this is how you put in the causes and conditions to be able to see this truth yourself. What's really going on? What do we really, what can we really take refuge in? And yet the specific experience of it is going to vary. So we may hear about many different kinds of techniques for meditation, for example. And it's useful to have so many possibilities if we can identify something that really is inspiring to us, helps us deal with our sort of our challenges. This is really useful, something that works for the kind of mind you have. And then to recognize that there's this way of investigating the Dhamma, way of investigating what we experience, so that we see the Dhamma directly. And, when the Buddha says, okay, the sutta we talked about last night, when we experience samadhi based on Dhamma, that's how we come to a place where we can know for ourselves what the truth is. When the Buddha was clear that there is truth, there is a fundamental immutable reality that we come to know through our own experience. This is what Dhamma is. If we try to push ourselves to accept something, then we'll have to backtrack again to really investigate so that we know it. So one thing that we can do at this point in our experience is identify, what do we really know and what do we take based on belief? And what do we see that what is really still a mystery to us? So when we can say, this part is something I know because I experience it, and I know, and I can prove it. Maybe something as simple as when a living being is born, they're definitely going to die. That kind of representation of impermanence that we can identify, and we know this is true from our own observation. That kind of thing. What do I really know to be true? And then there's the, okay, here's something I believe. Like I'm somehow responsible for the things that my ancestors did. Is that true? Am I? Or did I just get reborn into this particular body with these particular genes, with this particular ancestry, and it's not really something I can take responsibility for? And yet, what is really the So we can investigate this kind of thing, and then investigate this idea of a sense of self that picks up these ideas, that picks up these beliefs, and that we see, can we, through our experience in the practice, can we come to a place where we recognize that there's something beyond this materialistic view of individuals taking these actions, harming each other, harming themselves, not knowing what's beneficial for ourselves or others because of our delusion, all of that whole thing, that there's something beyond that, where there isn't separation among us. Can we come to a point where we recognize directly for ourselves that there is, in this fundamental reality, love, goodness, wholeness? So for most of us, that's a belief or a speculation, maybe. Or maybe there are points where we see into that to some degree, and we can verify that ourselves. That's kind of what that first real glimpse of Nibbana is. It's a direct experience of that reality. That, and that comes from the fullness of the practice, the whole Noble Eightfold Path, every aspect, the practicing of right speech, right action, right livelihood. And then, like when we say right, does that mean it's some kind of perfect speech, perfect action, perfect livelihood? Not in this realm. We don't have to have it perfect. In fact, we can't. It's not like that here in samsara. There's always going to be some dark side. So our effort, our intention is bring as much goodness and wholesomeness into it as we possibly can, so that the mind is elevated enough or not pulled down into the depths to such a degree that we can't see the truth. So as right as possible, or our intention to keep moving in that direction, that's really where we can put our intention, our attention, our effort. And that the right actions, or the good, the wholesome, that leads to more peace, more tranquility, more relief, that buoys us up. Maybe it is a little like floating in the ocean. Some waves are gonna overcome us, but not enough to pull us down. This is the point of this right action, right speech, right livelihood, and the development of our meditation practice, putting the effort into, which can be no effort really, the effort of letting go, into our mindfulness, to be present, to be willing to hold it all, to look, to be there, to be present, to be awake, to be alert, and calm the mind. Because that's where the opening is, the understanding of the depths of the Dhamma arises into that. And all of this is done from that right intention. Renunciation, non-ill will, non-cruelty. This is something we can prove for ourselves is better than the opposite. And we know it because we know how we feel. How do we feel when we're cruel? How do we feel when we're not cruel? How do we feel when we're compassionate and kind? So this is what I mean by what do we see? What do we know for ourselves? Can know that we can verify even without a lot of wisdom, because we can tell because of the way it feels. And then right view continues to develop. So it's like this working of the path, taking every different experience. That's why being open to the points of view of others and trying to take that on, put ourselves in their shoes, see what they're seeing and experiencing, and use it in the same way in this practice laboratory, in this way of, I don't know, laboratory isn't right because it's not artificial. It's not controlled conditions. It's in the real experience. And to be able to see it, examine it, is this true? Is this correct? Do I know, or do I just believe? And sometimes we have to believe until we can know, at least have our open mind, but not really, being attached, not clinging to those beliefs, but being willing to change them, not clinging to our views, but being willing to let them change based on what we gain from experiencing more, those kinds of things. It's a path of development that is generally gradual. We see results along the way, and then sometimes there's this enormous leap where the opening to the truth widens, and we really recognize that the way we've been seeing everything before is actually not clear. And we really can experience that clarity that doesn't go away, a new way of seeing. So the encouragement is to really look, being willing to listen to people with a very different point of view from ours, see what we can understand of it, see what we can know for ourselves is true, and what parts are distorted or that we can't prove, that we can't know yet, that we don't know yet, and hold that in that way. Okay, for now, I'm going to be open to this as a possibility. Some things we can immediately reject because we already know they take us down the wrong path. So it's like just having this clarity. Where am I in this process? Not like, oh, am I a stream enterer, whatever. Not that way, not with these labels that maybe we don't even really quite understand, but with experience. Is really seeing, and also having a sensitivity to where other people are at. How much can they, what is it that they're seeing? How much do they understand how to move through life in a way that leads upwards instead of downwards? And where can some encouragement support them? I think we always have this opportunity, because we live in this very diverse world, to experience, to open up to what we haven't been willing to open up to before. And that when we do that, we may feel a resistance in the mind. And I'm not talking about opening up to ways of life or actions that we know already are unwholesome. What I'm talking about is opening up to a different perspective on experience and really listening, opening up to feeling what's arising in us and being willing to stay with it, to understand it, but not as something to cling to, but as something to observe out in front of us where we can really see it clearly. I'm going to stop there. It's funny because I have this feeling like you all know that already. But it can be so hard in specific situations, like when your partner is starting to deal with dementia, for example, or a parent is going out down that path and they can't help it. The brain is changing. And it's the brain, not the mind. That's a very important thing to recognize. It's a brain issue, a physical change in their body. And at the end of life, oftentimes people who have had severe dementia and haven't been able to even recognize their family members will have a moment shortly before they die where they're totally clear, lucid, and talking to people by name and talking about important things. And why is that? So I can't tell you that I know for sure why it is, except that I do believe that the mind separates from the body, and as that process is already happening, and that when we speak through the mind instead of the brain and all of its deterioration, then there's that clarity. So it's an interesting thing to reflect on and maybe notice, because in meditation, it's possible to have a question like that be revealed and know it directly. It's not always like a person has to have some kind of psychic powers or this kind of thing. This can happen merely through insight, that you can understand the way things work, can understand that time is merely a convention, that we are not our ancestry, we are not this body, we are not the conditioning that we've received. These are the kinds of things we can know directly and will know if we keep traveling this path. So make an assessment. Might even want to write it down. This is what I know. This is what I believe. This is what I suspect. Just as an exercise. And then those things that we believe, we can question, investigate. Things we suspect, we can question and investigate and see what arises. Okay, maybe I'll stop there. I know it's a little bit late, but do you have any questions, comments? I'm not in a hurry. If you need to leave, that's okay. No questions, no comments? Okay.
I'd just like to thank everybody and observe that this session today was a perfect example of the beauty of this Sangha.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you, James.
I would like to say something. Um, Venerable, when I this morning thought it doesn't feel good for my heart to have revenge.
Mhm.
I also felt lonely, as if the world that I live in is a world where somehow it seems to be an advantage to like make justice or something like that for our own hands. But then coming here and listening to you, I realized is that I don't have yet the right view to see the beauty of my choice to investigate this need of revenge. And it's very helpful to be in Sangha and to have a group of people that is saying, yes, it's good to have a quality of investigation and to know act.
Yeah.
Because it can feel very lonely to have virtuosity. This idea of like, I am living a noble life when everything around is like, no, we are not living a noble life. My conditioning leads me to have this sense of isolation.
Mhm.
And that's why I also need the Sangha.
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
That's true for all of us.
thank you.
Yeah.
I I have a question and curious about life and when you talked about when we can the justification of taking someone else's life,
Mhm.
and how does that play in the context of the safety of our own living or the safety of a group of people? If we know, let's say, one person is responsible for taking the lives of many, does that justify taking that person's life? Or if we feel or notice that our life or the family's life is in danger, then how does that play into the context um, of taking someone else's life? Um, it's just a curiosity of like, how do we decipher those situations?
So I appreciate the question and the clarity with which it's expressed, because this is the same thing we've been talking a lot about. Lying. Is it ever justified? Like was being shared earlier. If someone hadn't lied to protect my ancestors, I wouldn't be here, for example.
That was to protect my mother.
Yeah.
And it's not far away. It's now.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Right. I get it. Okay. So this is the question. Now, let me try to explain. So we live in this world of samsara. Samsara um, applies to all the realms, the Buddha said, hell, heaven, all the stuff in between. That what is the nature of samsara? It's that it's um, a constant arising and ceasing of phenomena, a constant coming and going away again. Everything in samsara is impermanent. All of the and this even these things that seem very solid, like we can feel pretty solid. We've got this body, but we can observe directly that this is not going to last. It's not lasting. It's changing. We want to block that out. We want to go through most of our life ignoring the fact that this body's going to die. However, the reality is it's going to die. And the Buddha's encouragement is to look at everything from this perspective of is this a permanent thing or an impermanent thing? I'm looking at the lamp across the room. That's not going to be the same in 100 years or 1,000 years. Even the mountains, like the Rocky Mountains in the US are huge and very huge peaks, but the Appalachian Mountains on the other side of the country are kind of rounded and worn away. Like we can even see in this massive geology things that change, that are worn away. So samsara is constant arising and ceasing of phenomena. And the Buddha wanted us to look deeply into that and understand that there is something that doesn't change. Call it nibbana, call it consciousness, call it awareness, call it Dhamma. And that's where there's really peace, because everything else goes cool. All the passions, all the desires, all these passions, desires, ill will, and all of this comes along with an environment that changes constantly. Without this constant change, we wouldn't have desires. We have the desire to keep it the same. We have the desire to make it go away faster, all these desires, and the ill will because we don't like the way it is. This is all coming out of this constant changing, okay? So we are operating in this world where there's this constant change. And yet there's this influence from the unconditioned. There's this influence from, like what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, what is virtuous and what is not virtuous. And when living beings act in a virtuous way, it brings them closer to the ultimate reality. When we act in an unvirtuous way, it takes us further away. So we're living in this context where there's all this trouble, where there's all this deceit, but then there's this goodness and courage and cowardliness, and there's this whole mess. Now, in that context, we can be virtuous or we could be deceitful. We can understand, we can have this idea that that it's important to fight against people who are aggressive and harming innocent people. This is a very compelling argument. And in this reality, there are always going to be people who will do that because they're completely grounded, immersed, and abiding in this samsaric reality. So the Buddha once asked, is it possible to be a leader of a country without violence, and he never answered that question. Because in samsara, there's always going to be that happening. And, there will be people who will rise to that occasion and fight the enemy. Are they wrong? Well, wrong in what context? If it's the context of letting go of everything and realizing nibbana and coming to complete peace, then that's not the way you want to go. But is a person ready to say, well, in actual fact, it doesn't matter if someone kills me or not. Body's going to die anyway. But if I kill someone else, that's going to be a problem. That carries on with me to the next, until I realize nibbana. So it's like, okay, there's this, way of practicing in samsara that clings in a good way. Some things we have to cling to until we're really finished with this reality. Clings in a good way to those moral principles and takes the heat, even if that's being killed. standing up against injustice can help to form our character in a positive way. But, should someone be sort of condemned for lying to save other people? No. But do it knowing that there is a result. And the karmic results, again, it's so, the Buddha will say, well, there's a negative result to a negative action like that. How negative it is going to depend on all kinds of other factors. So in my position as a monastic, as one who's trying to show people the importance of keeping precepts, I'm not going to say break the precept, because that leads people down a path of being loose with their morality. But will someone be in a situation where they decide to break a precept because of the conditions and then deal with whatever that karma might be? Yeah, that happens. Arguing about when it's right and when it's wrong, I don't think is so useful. I think what's important is to keep purifying our intention. And this is what the Kruba Ajahns say, it was really fascinating once when this woman was asking what to do with the ants that had completely overrun her house. And Ajahn Ganha was like, you have to really look at your intention. And she's like, yeah, but I've tried everything. I've tried this natural thing and that thing and that thing and that thing. And the ants are just in everything. I can't get rid of them. He said, the way you're talking, your intention is not pure. He could see the ill will was right there. Can she purify that ill will away? She said, the way you're sounding, I could move. He said, yeah, you could move. He didn't say, well, sometimes you really have to do something and take the karma. He's not going to say that from his position, because he knows what that will lead to for many other people who hear that. How much are we willing to really dig into our intention and really purify away the ill will, the cruelty, and the desire in our own minds? So we live in samsara. We make decisions about how to act in samsara. And just, like the Buddha says, I know what happens when people act that way. I know what happens when you take this kind of action. He saw it directly. Maybe at some point someone won't believe you when you're telling the truth. Maybe that's okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And for me, I'm putting myself in that situation, and it's making me understand and realize that it's a process of clearing the heart and clearing up all of the residues of, I don't know the term for it, but the things that makes us act in vengeful or
Yeah.
protective ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is a process of just cleaning the heart. And that, I think, is the answer to being able to be in those situations and not taking a violent approach.
Yeah.
Even if it's threatening us or threatening other people. And
yeah. So I want to try to be clear, okay? And I'm not an arahant, so I can't say this is going to be a perfect understanding, but the way I see it is that there's a problem with planning to break a precept under certain circumstances. That way of thinking already brings problems to the mind. If we plan to keep the precepts, but we find ourselves in a situation where we make a decision to break them, then when I look at that, that's already happened. I don't condemn anyone. There's no condemnation. There's no ill will or putting down or negatively judging. It's like that happened, and then whatever a person decided to do, there's a path of spiritual recovery. And it's important to know that. And to also know that there's nothing, then this is what Ajahn Sumedho says, and I believe him. There's nothing that we've done in the past that stands in the way of our being enlightened. But you don't go into a situation thinking, I'm gonna kill this person or I'm gonna lie and then I'm gonna recover later. That's not how it works. It's got to be a purification. I mean, it's not, it is kind of how it works, but it's not it's the purification of that intention that's so important. Like you said, that purification of the heart. That when we, whatever we're doing, whether it's a small thing like, not stealing the office supplies, or whether it's really telling the truth, even though we'll feel embarrassed or something like that, we want to hold those precepts with tremendous respect and commitment. And then, there will be situations where there's no good option. There are those situations in samsara where there's no clear good choice. And then what will we do? We want to have the intention that we're going to do the very best we can to be as honorable as possible, keeping the precepts and protecting those who need protection and taking care of, the innocent. And if we get into some situation where we can't see another way and we make a choice to break a precept, then we step onto the path of spiritual recovery, but not with a planned determination. I'm gonna lie and I don't care. I've seen that in people. It's like, that's not the right way to think, because it damages us. It limits us. It limits us in our development and in our purification of heart. And that's the point. So why didn't Ajahn Ganha say, yeah, you may have to bring in the exterminators, or you may have to, do something with the ants? I mean, after all, they're ants. They're not human beings. It's because he knows that purification of the mind is what really is important. And we so easily have ill will. And we really need to be honest with ourselves and work through that. And if we're having ill will towards ourselves, we've got to look at that and let it go. It's true that we are talking about human beings and a lot of real suffering. And this is not about being insensitive to that. This is, yes. The Buddha also lived in that kind of reality where there were wars, where there were people so horribly mistreated. And what he could do was try to point people in the direction of Nibbana. And that's still what we need to do. And you know, it may be the case that it feels like taking that perspective doesn't honor enough the pain, the suffering, the danger, the loss, the difficulties and choices. Yeah, it's hard living in samsara. I use the example of Vajrayana with the ants because that's what I experienced. I saw that happen. I also, based on that, am pretty sure he's not going to tell someone who's joined the Thai army, yeah, you good, go for it. I'm going to bless the bombers that are going to go, which has happened, right? Blessing the planes that drop the atomic bombs, right? It's like, it's very important to look at this from a perspective. So I know you think I'm missing it, but what do you think?
Some heads are shaking no, some heads are shaking yes. I just can't.
So we'll keep talking about it, you know, and keep digging into it. And this is the point, you know, we keep looking at this stuff and seeing how the purification of our intention affects our ability, our ability to take it all in and be present with it and live according to the Dhamma.
So in purifying our intentions and the heart, and what are some ways that you would approach the purification process?
We have to honestly be present with what lies behind our actions. You know, if we're thinking, first of all, a lot of times too much thinking brings a lot more doubt. If we're speculating about what could happen, sometimes that's really helpful because we can prepare to do something wholesome and good. And sometimes it just brings more confusion and proliferation and doubt. And, you know, so we need to observe that too. I think the point is in using examples that are easier to look at, like what we heard earlier about, you know, someone not paying back a loan, for example, that's going to be a lot easier to investigate. We start to see our own patterns. Is my pattern one of immediately getting defensive and angry? Then we need to look at that pattern and see if we can reduce that tendency to start to change that pattern. Like when I'm, you know, for smaller things, the easier things to manage until we eventually and practice, you know, the Brahma Viharas and develop the opposite of our tendency for anger or you know, this is true regardless of what that defilement is, cultivating the opposite. But it's about honing our mindfulness and our sampajanya, our wisdom, and changing our reactions, our behaviors. That's what I think. Kieran?
Stuck something, because I've heard from a lot of Buddhist teachers to not be involved like in political movements and protests and things like that. And so, I mean, you all know I'm having to leave my home and travel across the world in part because of this current administration. What this administration is doing is going to kill millions of people. So if we don't, so it's like, to me, it's not even enough to say, take the precept, I will not kill. I'm trying to protect life. I'm trying to protect my mother from a very grim future in this reality that we're living in the US. And I'm thinking about, the people who are being detained and disappeared.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I feel there's this place that and maybe this is the topic for next week or something, but I get stuck on the idea of complicity, like to not be involved in politics. Like politics is the way human beings are connected to each other. It's like we're not separate from each other. Like we're all responsible for one another. I mean, that's in my belief system. And that if we don't do something, like if we don't get involved, then it's like the Germans saying, oh, nothing's happening. Everything's fine.
So I think everybody should get involved. I really do. I think we could make a lot of progress if there was a lot more showing up out, that I've heard, there are good examples of things that have been reversed and things that have been happening because people are showing up to protest. There's no precept being broken there. There's no there doesn't have to be any ill intention. We have to be careful to be peaceful and support people in being peaceful. Don't start, starting cars on fire and stuff like that, letting the ill will take control, but instead clarity of mind, reasonability, but showing up in mass to protest. Yes, there needs to be a lot more of it in this country right now. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not about just floating on a cloud to nirvana. This is about understanding that we can do, I think, a whole lot more good with peaceful resistance and organizing people to get together and speak out than we can with hatred and violence. We don't want to become like the people who are oppressing people and discriminating against them. We want to take the other route, being even more careful with our sila, because we are not going to be like them. We need to stand up to them. So I agree with you. I've never been, because I feel like, monastics get criticized a lot for being involved in politics, but we're not involved in politics, we're involved with morality. And if the practitioners don't speak out in favor of morality, who's going to do it? So I agree with you. There's a whole lot that we can do that's moral and upright and good and can even be joyful. Get together. That's what I think.
I really appreciate you saying that, Ayya. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that to say what you feel is true, that first of all, why we in samsara, we're all about rewards and punishment. Yeah, and we have a very hard time being able to think about the Dhamma without that overlay of punishment, right? And so I think from my perspective, also having served on juries or a jury, what you really want to encourage is rehabilitation, and to see that this person was in a situation where they're not a killer in the sense of they're going to go out and kill a bunch of other people, one other person. Okay. So it's like there's that to hold into, like, should this person be put in a confinement? Is that what's needed to protect society? I think that's the real question. If it's self-defense, what they're saying is this person doesn't want to go killing someone. They want to just protect their life. Okay. I mean, we don't even know what the karmic result is of that. There's a lot of mitigating factors. Okay. And I don't know what the situation is. I don't think that you're doing something wrong by identifying that this person acted in self-defense and therefore may benefit from a different kind of treatment than incarceration. Also, under certain circumstances, if someone's going to kill somebody, I don't like these stories that come later about, the bodhisattva killed this person because he knew they were going to kill these other people. I don't think that's helpful. But there's certainly the possibility of preventing them from doing it. And maybe that involves hitting them, or, there could be other ways, but
Right.
not with the intention to kill them. Even when we're looking backwards at something, it's different than looking forward to what I'm going to do. So when we're looking at what happened, what we want to have is a lot of compassion and support for everyone involved to move forward. Okay. That's different from setting an intention that I will do this thing against the precepts.
Right.
We don't want to set that intention, but we want to understand there are all kinds of different dire situations that people find themselves in. And it's the same with karma in general. What we want to do when we look forward is we want to know that, have a sense of what the results might be of an action that I will take. Like if I'm thinking of doing something, then is this going to lead to anybody's harm? Your own included. Refrain from doing that thing. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
But when we look back at the things we've done, even if we think it was incredibly wrong-headed or stupid or whatever, there's that. What's needed is that understanding of the causes and the compassion and the determination to go forward in a better way. Well, thanks everyone. I know we're gradually losing people because, hey, it's 11:20 here.
Oh my God, it was so late. Yeah.
I appreciate everybody's sincerity in the practice, and yeah,